Just over 1 year ago, I created my first ever WoW Classic character, the legendary warrior Fart and Sniff. And since then, we have done so much. We've explored every zone, ran every dungeon, and killed every single raid boss. And Vanilla WoW was the single greatest gaming experience that I've ever had. Like, genuinely, I've never felt this passionate about a video game before. But things are changing, because TBC is now here. New zones, new dungeons, new raids, and I cannot wait to see it for the first time ever. The time was around 11 PM and the Burning Crusade was very near to being released. And of course, I was stood outside of the Dark Portal patiently waiting. The servers, on the other hand, really were not having a good time. Shortly before I hit record, it was chaos. Alliance were wiping the Horde, then Horde were wiping the Alliance, etc. But as it got closer and closer to the release, no one could do anything. No abilities could be used, no mounts could be mounted, but that's when it happened. The expansion was officially released, and wow, such riveting gameplay. Yes, of course, the Blizzard servers had a complete meltdown and kicked everyone off literally all of the EU servers. And all I could really do is wait. So for the next half an hour, I sat and I stared at, well, nothing. And very randomly, I was actually able to log on. But to my surprise, no one was here. So either I had managed to get in before everyone else, or everyone else was already gone. But excitedly, I ran up to the Dark Portal, and for my very first time stepped on through. I was so excited, I couldn't wait to see Outland's beautiful skies for the very first time. And then I got disconnected again. So once again I sat for another 30 minutes trying to get in, restarting the game over and over again, hoping to see at the very least a queue to get in. But eventually, that horrid loading screen disappeared and we were standing in Hellfire Peninsula. I was so happy. Finally, I was going to be able to play, or so I thought. I stood trying to mount up for a good 5 minutes, but I made my way down to accept the very first TBC quest, only to discover that the NPC wasn't there. And at this point, it was already 12:30 AM, and I just thought that this really wasn't worth it. So I made the very wise decision to log off and get at least a couple hours of sleep, and then see what the servers are like then. So logging back on at around 2 AM, not only was I able to get into the game, but the NPC was actually here and I was able to pick up the quest and grab the flight point. The game then instantly threw us onto a bird and sent us flying over to Honor Hold. And honestly, this first look at the zone around me, I couldn't believe it. This place was absolutely beautiful. And it felt a little strange because I became so used to the weekly grind of get world buffs, do raids, then log out and do it all again next week. I was so happy to get more world to explore, more quests to do, more dungeons to spam. Once we had arrived in Honor Hold, I handed in the little quest we had been given and had a little look around the place, which included setting my Hearthstone here. And now that the introduction stuff is done, we are now able to do what MMOs do best, which is whatever the hell we want. And I decided to head over for a dungeon run, since we are able to do that right off the bat. And man, just taking those first few steps out into the world, I was so happy. I couldn't wait to see what the expansion had to offer. And for our first stop, it is none other than the dungeon Blood Furnace. Now, as far as dungeons go, I personally love doing them. I think that they're one of the best parts of an MMO, and having a whole new set of them to do, I just couldn't wait. And well, Blood Furnace was absolutely awesome. To my understanding, the Fel Orcs are part of Illidan's army, and the Blood Furnace is where they extract Fel blood from Magtheridon in order to use it to fuel more Fel Orcs. I mean, come on, that's awesome. Now, in terms of the loot, well, what I was told by a lot of people is that I would just replace all of my vanilla gear within 5 minutes of TBC. Well, that's actually not true at all. In fact, we wouldn't be replacing any gear, at least for a good while. That being said though, I still really enjoyed seeing all of the new items. Every single green BOE was something new, and it really made it feel like this was a whole new experience. And right off the bat, the dungeons were already more difficult than vanilla, mainly because of these technician guys who worked almost exactly like the technicians from Blackwing Lair, where they throw AoE bombs on top of players and they also set mines that take half of your HP at once if you stand on them. Was it difficult? No, it wasn't. But it's really nice to have at least something to look out for because, again, it just makes the place feel alive. So we cleared our way through until we were standing in front of the very first boss of the dungeon, Rogak. But before we could fight the boss himself, we had to flick this little lever and a couple waves of mobs came out to attack us. They really weren't anything special. In fact, I think these guys were even squishier than the other mobs. But after defeating all 4 waves of the mobs, we can then attack the boss himself. And he's this giant floating tentacle eye. I mean, who comes up with this stuff? But yeah, I didn't really manage to get a proper look at him because he fell over really quickly. So moving down towards the final boss now, our tank actually died to these big Felguard guys. And I think it's because they like to charge the casters and reset threat, or something along those lines anyway. But thanks to my fantastic bear tanking skills, we were able to clean them up and res the tank. And very luckily, whilst we were sitting and replenishing mana before the final boss, a Dawnstone dropped out of a chest. What it's for, I had absolutely no idea, but judging by the reaction of the other players, it's something that I can sell. Which was kinda true. I mean, I'm not going to say no to 50 gold, right? But moving on to the final boss now is Keladan the Breaker. But again, we had to cleave down a couple of adds that he came with. And he does actually have a mechanic. It's a big AoE fire nova, but we ended up killing him so quickly that we never even saw it. For the loot, he dropped the Ryments of Divine Authority, a pretty nice caster cloak. And another thing that I absolutely love is that there's actually a path straight back to the entrance of the dungeon. Gone are the days of having to run back through the entire instance trying to avoid all of the mobs that we skipped. And just like that, we had managed to clear our first ever TBC dungeon. And what a fantastic way to start the grind. So with one dungeon run now completed, the group I was with had a fantastic healer, Mr. Zero Impact. This guy was not only a fantastic healer, but a really nice dude, and I'm still friends with him even now. And well, he asked if I wanted to go in for another run, and obviously I said sure. But first, I really had to sort out my bag situation, because it was just full of complete garbage. Leftover consumables and pummelers from vanilla. So in order to help out with the bag sorting, I decided to update my enchanting skill, because as expected, all the enchanting materials were ridiculously expensive. So not only does it allow us to save space, but we would be making a good bit of gold on the side. But with our bags all lovely and clean, it was time for us to head back in for our second Blood Furnace run. Except this time, we are tanking. And well, I kinda had a mini heart attack because everything kinda froze in place and I thought the servers had crashed again, until whatever that was happened. But surprisingly, it went pretty well. Bear tanking has become so much more consistent with the addition of Mango. Like a single crit on the mob generates enough threat to last a whole fight. I was even able to pull the mobs pretty well, making sure to avoid all of the techie mines. Well, for the most part anyway. And yes, I'm now realizing as I'm writing this that Brogak in fact wasn't the first boss and that this guy actually is. Mechanics wise, he's not really much of anything. He kinda just flings you in the air a bit. He is pretty cool looking though, reminded me a lot of something inside of Naxxramas. So whilst we were just clearing through the dungeon now, I think it's probably best if I explain the plan currently. Now, originally, my plan wasn't to do the dungeon spamming thing. However, for the most part, we are going to be sticking to dungeons. And the reason why is almost entirely because of rep. In TBC, we obviously get access to heroic dungeons, and in order to do heroic dungeons, we need to be at least revered with the corresponding faction. And the way others made it sound is that you could only get rep from the dungeons. And this is my main character. This is the one that I like to min-max and do all the end game raids and stuff with, and I really didn't want her to fall behind. Now looking back, I do realize that that wasn't true, and I could have just farmed the rep later. Besides, I still really enjoy doing dungeons, and doing this would let me experience every single one of them, meaning we would have at least some idea of what what to expect from the heroic versions later down the line. And this version of TBC is extremely alt friendly, because once you unlock the heroic once, you don't have to do it again on any other characters. So my plan is to do everything properly on the hunter when we get into it. But for now, it's all about getting the rep done. So we clear up Brogak and Calidan and then reset the dungeon and do it again. This time it really wasn't anything too different. I of course switched back to cat spec because, let's face it, I'm really not that good at tanking. We also had our first wipe in a dungeon, which had to come sooner or later, right? But amongst all the chaos, something very exciting happened. We hit level 61. And to be honest, after seeing my character stuck at 60 for so long, it felt kinda off to see 61. As for the first talent point, I decided to put it into Natural Shapeshifter. It's a very simple talent that makes all shapeshifting mana costs reduced by 10, and then eventually going up to 30 once we have 3 points in it. Although simple, it is a very important talent, because as cat spec, we obviously use a lot of mana through power shifting, and this just lets us add more shifts before going It also brings us one step closer to getting Omen of Clarity, which is an entirely different thing that we will talk about later. And well, that was it. We were now set to spam until we couldn't anymore. I knew the route, and I knew that I could tank if we needed. So fast forward several hours, we were of course still running Blood Furnace, but we were getting somewhat close to Honored level with Honor Hold, which is all we had to do before moving on to something else. And well, at this point, it was now morning, and we all know that feeling when you've just pulled an all-nighter. So we quickly finished up the run, and I actually didn't go back into Blood Furnace. I decided to head on into Hellfire Ramparts, because apparently there's a quest at the end, and of course, I wanted to do it. So I found myself a group of players to run the dungeon with, and we got stuck straight into it. Almost immediately though, something was off. I recognized this place. I had definitely seen this place before. I would even say that I was familiar with it. Clearly at some point during my retail grinding, I had spammed this dungeon for one reason or another. Now of course, running it on Classic was completely different to anything I remember doing on retail, but it was nice to see something that I was familiar with, but in a much slower pace. It allowed me to actually look at what I was killing, and yeah, these guys were cool. They looked exactly as you would expect an orc to look. Heavily armored, axe swinging freaks. On to the first boss now is Watchkeeper Garglemar. I really like this guy's design. He's got no hands and instead has a sword and axe for hands. Doesn't seem all too practical if you ask me. Mechanics wise, I honestly don't think he did anything, and we were able to kill him pretty cleanly. Moving upstairs now and on to the second boss, it is Omor the Unscarred. And he's a big scary demon guy, and someone in the chat said to kill the ads. To be honest, I actually only saw one of them pop up, but I did what I was told and I meleeed him down. After he was down, we could actually then move straight into the final boss of the dungeon, Vazrudin. And Vazrudin himself actually fell over pretty quickly, and I was able to get the letter quest we were after. But that's when his dragon comes down, and we've now got to kill him as well. And he was somewhat tough. His mechanic was what every classic player fears: fire you've got to not stand in. But with the dungeon now done and the letter quest in hand, I headed back over into Honor Hold to turn it in, and it gave a massive 20k XP. And we were so incredibly close to being honored with Honor Hold, so I decided to head back into Blood Furnace for one last run. And it was perfectly standard. I completed a random quest that I found, got blown up by the landmines, and managed to take down Brogak no problem. And well, we were so incredibly close by the end of it, but unfortunately had to go back in for another. And well, after that run, we were officially finished with the first rep grind. And honestly, I was just completely dead. I could barely see straight, I was so tired. So I made the responsible decision to go to bed for at least 5 hours so that I could wake up ready to grind. So waking up later the same day, it was now about 5 PM. Yes, doing this completely destroyed my sleep schedule. But now that we are done with Hellfire Citadel, for now at least, our next stop on the list is the Slave Pens to grind out reputation for the Cenarion expedition. And as I was riding over, I was actually able to get a proper look at the zone, and it's just so beautiful. I also found this humongous thing, which I've heard many horror stories about. Kinda like the Devil Sores on crack. But taking those first few steps into Zangarmarsh, man, I was in love. This might have became my favourite zone in the game. The first thing I did though was set my Hearthstone here to allow for easy bag clears and repairs. But of course, we had work to do, so I wasted no time and immediately started moving towards the dungeon entrance. But along the way, I made sure to have a good look around, because I honestly loved the aesthetic, which is kinda weird because I've never really been huge on swampiness. But this zone had an elegance to it. It was slightly eerie, but cozy at the same time. Along the way though, I actually found a second settlement area, and admittedly it took me way longer to figure out how to get up to it than it should have. And since this slave pens is literally around the corner from here, I decided to make this my home instead. But with all that now out of the way, it was time to get to it. And apparently the entrance was located in the center of this giant lake. However, I really struggled to get to it. These stupid fish kept attacking me. So using this blood elf as fish bait, I was luckily able to sneak past them and watched as he was mauled to death by the fish. Actually getting to the dungeon though, I thought was pretty damn cool. Because you enter into this giant tentacle pipe thingy and you swim down and it opens up into this big cave, and it really did feel like you were in a hidden cave under a giant lake. Getting to the dungeon now though, it really didn't take too long to find a group and we got straight to it. Obviously, as the name suggests, this dungeon's theme is that the Naga have taken Draenei prisoners and are using them as slaves. That does offer a pretty interesting mechanic though, because if you kill the big Naga slave master, the Draenei become friendly towards you. However, the Draenei still offered reps if you killed them, so we made sure to kill them first. As a whole though, I thought this dungeon was pretty cool. It was definitely quite a dramatic shift from Hellfire Citadel, going from massive armoured orcs to living fish people. The first boss from this dungeon is Menu the Betrayer. This guy is quite cool, being a Draenei that betrayed his people and is now enslaving them. Mechanics wise, he is a shaman and he likes to drop corrupted totems around him. Other than that though, he was pretty straightforward and we could clean him up nice and easily. The second boss was probably my favourite, called Rockmar. He is literally just a giant mutant crab thing. As for the mechanics, I don't really think there was anything notable. He was probably doing something to the tank, but as a DPS it was as simple as stand and stab. Moving on to the final room now, we cleared off the crabs and set this guy free, and that's when something tragic happened. Our healer disconnected right before the final boss, and apparently a massive chunk of EU players got kicked offline due to the servers being on fire. So the tank switched over to being the healer and I became the tank. And I really wasn't sure what I was supposed to be doing, but they said tank him against the wall, so that's exactly what I did and it seemed to work out okay. And just like that, we had managed to clear our very first slave pens. So with our first slave pens run now completed, I actually didn't go straight back in. As a group, we decided to head over and give the Underbog a go. And well, I was expecting just more Naga stuff, but this one is actually a lot more themed around tentacle squid monsters, or whatever the hell that thing is. And well, pretty much immediately after we started our run, we managed to hit level 62. As for our talent point though, I just did the exact same as level 61 and shoved it into natural shapeshifter, which does make a huge difference by the way. You get at least 2 extra power shifts overall, which not only gives me more damage on bosses, but lets me go longer than 1 pack of mobs before needing to drink. The first boss of the dungeon though is Hungerfen. He's basically just a massive version of the squid monsters. Mechanics wise, I didn't personally notice anything to be honest. I'm also now realizing that I forgot to mention exactly the same as the Hellfire Citadel dungeons. Unfortunately, there is literally 0 pieces of gear for us throughout either of these dungeons, which is both a good thing and a bad thing. It's good because I can list myself as full base and get into groups almost immediately, and it's bad because I do want to be chasing new gear, there's just nothing new to get. For the most part though, this dungeon was more themed towards the nature side of things. That was until we got towards the end of the dungeon where we go back to killing Naga and weirdly more Draenei. So I assume these Draenei are either betrayers or potentially slaves that have joined the Naga. That did eventually lead us onto the second boss of the dungeon, Gaz-An, who according to Wowhead is a Hydra god or something like that anyway. Not very godlike if you ask me though, considering we killed him in about 15 seconds. But now that he's dead, we jump down off of the platform and begin making our way down the hallway towards the final boss. I also found this night elf for a random quest that someone shared. Moving down to the final boss now, he is a funky dude called the Black Stalker. I mean, what the hell is this lanky ass thing? Quite unfortunately though, our tank ended up getting slammed by Mr. Lanky here, so I quickly shifted into bear form and taunted the boss to attack me, and doing so allowed us to clean up the fight quite easily. And that was it. We had officially completed our first ever run of the Underbog. Not gonna lie though, I wasn't the biggest fan of this one. I'm not too keen on spaghetti monsters, but at the end of the day, I'm still glad that I went in to see it. So now that we had at least experienced the dungeon, it was time to spam until we were at least honoured with the Cenarion expedition. We did slave pens again, then back over to the Underbog again, just to keep things nice and mixed, you know? And we then finished things off with 2 more runs of slave pens, which I decided to tank, which went about as well as you could expect with me as a tank. And at this point, it was nighttime again, and I was completely dead from grinding all day. And to be fair, we had made some really good progress. We were level 62, almost 63, and had 1.5 reputation grinds finished. But for now, I really just needed a proper night's sleep. Logging on to play day 2 of TBC, I felt refreshed and ready to grind. But if I'm honest, I just straight up didn't record the first few hours, because all I was really doing was trying to get honoured with Cenarion Expedition, and I don't really need hundreds of gigabytes worth of slave pens footage. During that time though, I did manage to get us to level 63, and I used the talent point on the final level of Natural Shapeshifter. And although I didn't record everything, I did decide to record the final run of course, which went a little bit wrong right at the very end. We ended up pulling both packs of the crabs, which proved to be just a little too many mobs, but we quickly respawned and we managed to clean everything up, no bother. And that was it. We are now completely finished with the Cenarion expedition grind. And well, that left us in a pretty weird position, because we were sat at like 1/5 of the way through level 63, and we weren't due to go to the Orkney dungeons until level 64. And sure, I could probably just spam more slave pens until then, but I think we have done enough dungeons, at least for now anyway. So in terms of questing options, I was quite tempted to go back through into Hellfire Peninsula so that I could do everything in order, I guess. But travelling back and forth from the slave pens, I really liked Zangarmarsh, and I just couldn't pass up the opportunity to explore it a bit. So first off, I went back into Telrador and grabbed all of the available quests there. And lucky for us, the first few we were going to tackle were literally right below Telrador, and it was the task of slaying 10 Marshfang Rippers, which are like little versions of the Underbats. And man, being able to get a proper look at everything, this zone was just awesome. It felt like a simple swamp aesthetic with little rickety paths leading everywhere, but at the same time it had this perfect balance of weirdness. The giant mushroom forests were great, and seeing all of the weird alien creatures roaming around was just cool. And the quests as a whole were pretty simplistic, which is a good thing. I was able to just chill out for a bit and not worry about rep farming or anything along those lines. Eventually I had managed to make my way all the way up to the very northeast area to a place called the Deadmire. And the reason I came up here already was simply because I saw on the map that there was a quest here, which was the simple task of taking the thingy back to an NPC in Telrador. So I quickly finished up the Marshfang Ripper quest and made my way over to the first settlement that we visited, which is the Cenarion Refuge. And here we were able to grab another big chunk of quests to do. And it got to the point where we literally had like 15 quests for this zone with loads more quest markers on the map. So to start it off, I began moving to the south this time, where I ran around the outskirts of this big lake slaying some hydras, until I came across our second quest objective, the task of slaying Naga. I mean, who doesn't love a good bit of Naga murder every now and then, right? Now, one thing that has massively improved the questing experience since vanilla is the addition of Mangle, because in vanilla we only had access to Claw, which really just isn't a good ability, right? And now that I'm thinking about it, this is the first time we've quested on this character since leveling, which was way back in like phase 2 of vanilla. But looking back on that now, the difference between Mangle and Claw is huge. But anyway, I quickly finished up the Hydra quest and collected all of the Naga claws, and that's when I hit a bit of a wall, because we actually had an elite quest to do here. And since at the time of recording it was like 7 AM, there really wasn't many people around to ask for help. But regardless, I decided to give it a go anyway. And well, it started out great, until whatever the hell that was that hit me. And that was a bit crushing, because I really wanted to get as many quests done as I could. But I thought back to my training, and I remembered how I soloed the Blackrock Depths boss, Lord Rockor. So I switched to my bear spec and equipped whatever stamina pieces I had lying around in my bags. I also popped regrowth and rejuvenation to basically keep me at full health for as long as possible. And it looked pretty even for most of the fight, until I got a nice couple of crits and managed to take the mini boss down solo, which felt fantastic. But with the Naga now dead, I moved back over to the southeast. This time we had to kill a bunch of Umbrafen, and these are some freaky ass looking dudes. Not quite as bad as the Harpies, but they're definitely up there. I'm not actually sure how to describe them, to be honest. They do, however, have an incredibly cozy looking village, and correct me if I'm wrong, but are these guys not like Draenei before they become Draenei? Whilst I was over here though, I also found another Mr. Lanky, and yes, this was yet another elite quest mini boss. So using the exact same tactic as before, I switched over into bear spec, popped a regrowth plus rejuvenation, and began mauling Mr. Lanky to death. And right before he was dead, another feral druid invited me to join his group, clearly just so he could get quest completion. So you're welcome, Clawbacca. But after taking him down, my quest log now looked like this. I mean, is there any better feeling in WoW than this? And by the way, this was only after like an hour and a half of questing. In vanilla, this amount of quests would easily be 2+ hours. And I think this is a great change, because let's be honest, vanilla questing is just needlessly long. But after handing all of those in, we are of course presented with even more stuff to do. So I headed south and into this cave where we had to kill 10 marsh dredgers. And I'm not 100% sure on the lore in this cave or anything, but there seems to be a bit of a feud between these giant moss freaks and the little blue spore guys. And despite me saying that most of the quests in TBC are shorter and whatever, this one was actually quite needlessly long. Though I don't think it was because of the quest design this time, I think it was just because there were a couple people contesting the area. We also had to go back over to the Naga area, not to kill any, but this time we had to disable lake controls. Again, I don't really know what I'm talking about, but I assume the Naga are attempting to siphon something from the lake. But once that was done, I once again headed back over to the Cenarion refuge and handed all of the quests in. And for the first time in a while, I returned to Telrador to do the exact same thing, which admittedly I probably should have done much sooner since we could have been working on everything at once. So to start off the second round of quests, what better way to do it than with something incredibly frustrating? What we had to do this time was collect 8 eel fillets, and if you've watched the channel before, then you'll know just how much I hate underwater quests. The only time I ever really enjoyed an underwater quest was on the Shaman, because obviously we had access to underwater breathing, so we were free to just roam around the ocean freely and take our time. And yes, I realised about an hour later that we were given an item that allows us to breathe underwater. Afterwards, we once again had to kill a big elite Naga mob, and yes, I did the exact same thing that I did on the first 2 elite mobs, switched to bear spec, etc, etc. However, this one was a hell of a lot harder. She was spawning ads to come and attack me and overall just hitting a lot harder. However, this time we actually had a friend to help us, but that's when the horde decided to start attacking. They killed me, but very luckily our friend was able to finish the job. We then actually had to go all the way back up to the Deadmire, this time for a couple of kill quests. We had to kill withered bog lords, parched hydras, and withered giants. Now this place kinda intrigued me a bit. Like, why is the entire zone so beautiful and full of life except this one area? So I decided to look it up, and turns out this area used to be a lake, but the Naga siphoned out all of its resources and it's now nothing but an empty wasteland filled with corrupted mobs. Which makes sense why there's all those big Naga machines around Zangarmarsh's main lake. I like that we can piece together bits of lore here. The quests themselves were actually pretty quick though, so I smashed my way through them and then made a return to Telrador, where I turned in a couple of quests and empty my bags, just the usual stuff. So now I actually decided to move over to the west of the zone for the first time. I grabbed this quest from Watcher Lisa and got stuck straight into the questing. And man, this area was so awesome looking. I loved how vibrant everything was. I even took a minute just to look at it. I mean, this place just felt so alive. The quests themselves though were actually quite simple. We were just killing bog lords for their tendrils. However, this small little area was so contested, with mostly Horde too. I really only saw about one other Alliance player here, but of course I stuck it out anyway, and I was able to get the quest done after about 20-ish minutes. We then had to go north a bit, not to kill anything this time, but to collect discarded nutriment off the ground. And I think this was a follow-up quest to the last one, but to be honest I really don't know anymore. I kinda lost track of everything. But I then handed it in to Watcher Lisa, which then sent us way up north, this time to kill ogres. Seems a little bit out of place, but I wasn't going to argue. This quest took forever to complete. This one literally took me 30 minutes to get done. And it's not like there was a lack of mobs or it was really contested or anything. They just really didn't want to drop the quest items. But regardless, I did eventually manage to complete it, alongside finishing up a little spore collecting quest that I had been doing passively on the side. And so for the final time, I returned to Cenarion Refuge and handed my quests in, which got us to level 64. And the crazy thing is, we had been questing for like 3.5 hours now, and there was still tens of quest markers on the map. And I'll be honest, I think at least as a solo, that questing was way quicker for leveling than dungeon spamming. But now that we are level 64, it was time to get back to work on the rep farming. So I packed up my things and began moving over to Terracar Forest. Finally, something green, kinda. As much as I loved Zangarmarsh, I'll always be a sucker for the green zones. Almost immediately after entering Terracar Forest, the first thing I saw was of course the capital city for the Burning Crusade, Shattrath City, affectionately known as Shat. But I can't lie, it was kinda empty. I definitely don't think I was ahead of everyone else. I mean, comparing myself to the pace that my guild was leveling at, I was miles behind. But I guess everyone is just out and about leveling their characters. I didn't want to spend too much time in Shattrath, but I wanted to at least familiarise myself with the main things. So I set my Hearthstone at the Scryer's Inn. I also visited the cooking trainer for some reason, and had a little browse of the reputation rewards. But overall, I think Shat is a fantastic place. To be honest, it's really nice to have a home that isn't Stormwind. I mean, I like Stormwind and all, but it's just nice for a little change. But with the little city exploration over, it's time to get to work. So I hopped onto my mount and began moving down towards the Mana Tombs. But to my surprise, the nice greenage had ended, and the zone became a massive grey desert with a huge coliseum inside. And something about this place felt awesome. Probably because we are just a tiny little speck surrounded by these massive walls with no way out. Well, to be honest, there probably is a way out, I just couldn't find it. And well, this was going to be our home for a little while, because down in here, there are the 4 Okanai dungeons, and first up is the Mana Tombs. And I can't lie, as we're progressing through the levels here, it is getting harder and harder to find groups as a feral druid. Nobody likes cats apparently. But of course, I tried and was eventually able to find myself a group to run it with. So first off, this place very obviously has a completely different vibe than any other dungeon so far. I mean, going from massive orcs to more of a nature themed into whatever the hell this place is was pretty dramatic. So we clear our way through the first few packs of mobs until we get to the first boss, Pandemonius, who is this giant void guy. And he was very easily the toughest boss yet. Like every single dungeon I do, I was going in completely blind. Turns out he shifts into this void state where he has a spell reflect for all damage, including melee damage. Plus he shits out some void bolts every now and then. And the group was so incredibly close to getting him down, but unfortunately wiped with the boss on less than 1% HP. But we rezzed up and went straight back at him again. Going in this time and actually knowing what was going on, we of course were able to take him down properly. But even still, this guy was chunking away at our health, and at times we were pretty close to dying. Now in terms of the loot, well, again, unfortunately there isn't anything good enough for us. Not too long after killing the first boss, we were standing right in front of the second boss, Tabarok, and he's a giant rock elemental dude, and he was significantly easier to kill than the first. As far as I could tell, all he does is sometimes stuns the party and does some AoE damage. Other than that though, he's just pretty tanky. But apart from the first boss, this dungeon felt very easy as a whole. I kinda just shut my brain off and pressed shred until we were eventually standing in front of the last boss of the instance, Nexus Prince Shattrath. In terms of mechanics, well, I was told just to kill the ads when they spawn, so that's exactly what I did, and that was it. He did drop this cool looking bow though, and this group was actually staying to spam for most of the day, so of course I decided to stay with them, and so the spamming began. But I'll be honest, I really wasn't a massive fan of this dungeon. Apart from the first boss, all of the mobs were a breeze and pretty uninteractive, and the aesthetic just isn't really for me. It's just a bit spacey for my liking. But regardless, we still had to get the rep done. And I was here for practically the entire rest of the day. And I didn't record every single run because, again, I really don't need hundreds of gigabytes worth of Mana Tombs footage. But during the spam fest, we did manage to hit level 65. And for the talent point, this time I started shoving them into the talent intensity, which when maxed out would allow 30% of our mana to continue to regenerate whilst casting. Plus it makes Enrage instantly generate 10 rage, which is a nice add-on, I suppose. And well, after like 15 runs of Mana Tombs, we had done it. We were now honoured with the Consortium. So we quickly finished up the run, and at this point it was the end of day number 2 of TBC launch. And we had done so much so far, with even more to do later on. We'd managed to get level 65, we were honoured with Honour Hold, the Cenarion expedition, and now the Consortium. Plus we were even able to squeeze in a nice big questing session. But there is still so much left to do and see. But I had been grinding for non-stop the entire day. So for now, sleep. I hope you all enjoyed today's video because I enjoyed making it. So I know that we said we were going to be doing one big 60 to 70 video, and I went into making this video with that intention. However, there is just so much stuff to cover, and 60 to 65 is already one of the longest videos I've ever made. So what I've decided to do is split it into two, 60 to 65 and then 65 to 70. And then when they are both finished, I'm going to smash them both together and make one long video, just like how I do with the leveling series, because I really didn't want there to be a huge gap between the last video and this video. But as a whole, so far, TBC has been friggin' epic. I did my first raid not too long ago, so I'm looking forward to showing you that as well. Plus, I think I'm probably going to start leveling the hunters soon too. The expansion is honestly everything I could ask for. I'm having an absolute blast, and I've been playing every single day since it launched. And I'm really excited for the videos in the near future. Anyway, I think that is enough yapping for today. So I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you all later.